Hey guys, Mr. Middleton here. Today we're going to talk about writing equations. Today, at the end of this video, you should be able to write an equation in slope-intercept form from a graph and a word problem. Okay, so recall from last lesson that slope-intercept form, try to get space. That slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So y equals mx plus b, where m is our slope and b is our y-intercept. The variables in this equation are x and y. These values change within the same problem. The other letters, m and b, are not variables, but rather constants that need to be filled for each problem. These values don't change within one problem, they're constant. Okay. So therefore, in each problem, we need to find the values of m and b and plug them into our equation. The values of x and y and plug them into our equation. So here's what we did yesterday, kind of a refresher. We had y equals 1/3 x minus 4. We always start with the y-intercept and finish with the slope. So we're going to plot the y-intercept. In this case, the y-intercept is -4, the number without a variable by it. And so we go down 1, 2, 3, 4. Our start is always on this up and down line, always on this vertical line. That's always where we start. Okay, so we plot the y-intercept, and then we use the slope to find another point on the line. And our slope is 1/3. Remember, that's rise over run. And so 1/3. We will go up 1 and run 1, 2, 3. Up 1 and run 1, 2, 3. We could also, remember, do negative over negative, which is positive. So we could go down 1 and left, 1, 2, 3. Down 1 and left, 1, 2, 3. And so there's our line. Okay, make sure you're careful with your count. If your line starts to curve, then you probably messed up somewhere. Right. And so here's our line. The line for the equation, y equals 1/3 x minus 4. Okay, today what we're going to do is we're going to write the equation from the graph. Okay, so we'll want to have an equation up here. Again, we will start with the y-intercept and finish with the slope. Alright, so we're going to identify the slope and the y-intercept from the graph. Okay, so I will choose some points. So first of all, the very most important point in this case is the y-intercept. Okay, where on that line does it intersect the y-axis? Okay, and this point will be, in this case, 0, 2. Because it's the y-intercept, the x value will always be 0. So that's not really anything new for us. It'll always be 0. And then what I'll want to do is I want to pick the points where our line intersects, I'll say the crosshairs perfectly. Okay, so we'll notice here that this is a little bit below the line. This is to the right. This is where our line intersects. Okay, a couple other lines that we could look at and choose from, or other points that we could look at and choose from. But I chose this one, so we over 2, down 1, that is at 2, -1. Okay. Alright. So, I now have my y-intercept, b, which is at 2. I need to find my slope. It goes down 1, 2, 3, and goes over 2. So down 3, -3. To the right 2, +2. And so my slope will be -3 over 2. So I want to identify the slope and y-intercept for my graph. I want to insert those values in the correct spots in the formula or equation. I'll say formula here. And then I want to write the equation. And so here's what I have. Y equals mx plus b is my skeleton for the slope-intercept form. I have my slope, which is -3 halves. Then I plug in x. I add my y-intercept, which is 2. And now I have the equation of this line. Y equals -3 halves x plus 2. Okay, so I can graph a line given an equation, and I can write an equation given a line. Flipping to the back side, got a few more lines here. Alright, and so let's do that again. Just identifying some points here. Looks like we have one here. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, so our y-intercept, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is at -6. Our slope goes up 2 and over 1. So +2, and +1. And so now I'm going to just plug that in the right spot into my equation. So y will equal, and I can write 2 over 1, but just because I'm writing the equation, I'm just going to say 2. X, my y-intercept is -6. Okay. Alright, for number 2, where does it cross the y-axis? It's here. Notice that that is right on the origin, so 0. Okay, my slope goes, I need to find the next point here. So it went down 1 and to the right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So -1 and then to the right +6. So my slope is -1, 6. Okay, so 1 negative, 1 positive means my slope stays negative. And so the equation for my line will be y equals -1/6 x, all in my slope. And I won't write +0. I know that I identify my slope as my y-intercept as 0, but I'm not going to say +0. It doesn't make mathematical sense. That's why we don't see +0 right when we're when we're looking at equations either. Okay, and that's in slope-intercept form. All right, try that for number 3. And then, I'm going to make sure I highlight this so we can all see it the same way. If you need to look at your notes from yesterday, or the last lesson at least, write the equation for this line, number 4. Alright, so we can write the equation given a line, and now let's write the equation given some situations. For this problem, it says Terrence makes $8.75 per hour at his job. Assume he has $110 saved already. Write an equation in slope-intercept form that represents this situation. Okay, what is the slope? Okay, and so this is where we have to think about a little bit. Remember that slope in a line tells us how much the line changes. How much does Terrence's money situation change? Okay, in this case, the slope would be $8.75 per hour. Okay, that's how much remember we said we can think of slope as how much the line changes, and in this situation we can think of it as how much his money changes. His money changes at $8.75 per hour. What is the y-intercept? Okay, so we think of y-intercept as where does it start? Where does Terrence start? Because we're talking about money. Well, he starts with $110. What does it mean in this situation? He starts with $110. Okay, and so then our equation would be y equals our slope, which is $8.75. And I'm just going to write x plus his slope or his y-intercept, which is 110. Okay, and now we would be able to use this information to answer some questions about Terrence and how much money he would make, or how much hours he would need to work, because y is going to stand for the money he makes and x stands for the number of hours he works. And so it says, using this equation, how much would Terrence have if he worked for 25 hours? Well, x will stand for hours because $8.75 per hour. And so in our equation we can say, well, let's plug in that value and say 8.75 times 25. 8.75 times 25 plus 110. And so if Terrence worked for 25 hours, he would make $328.75. Okay? Says, from just a different angle, just a little bit of different angle, it says, let's say Terrence now has $600. How many hours did Terrence work? Well, remember that y stands for the money he has. And so if we're saying he has $600, and we already know that he makes $8.75 per hour, and he started off with $110, then we have all this. Okay, so you see how we had 600, we knew that meant y in our situation, so we set it up this way. Okay, so with this information, solve it and bring to class done how many hours Terrence must have worked in order to get $600. Alright, so you should be able to write an equation from a line, you should be able to write an equation from a situation, and you should be able to use those equations really in order to project what's happening and understand what's happening. See ya.